Game feel. This term might not mean much to you, but it's absolutely critical in making a fun and satisfying game. It's exactly what sets a mediocre game apart from something that people enjoy and want to go back to. A lot of people miss the importance of this part of development. I mean, of course you should work on your gameplay first and foremost, but if your game is working and your gameplay is set up, you cannot forget about this. I've been working on my multiplayer game Starground recently, and since I have both the automation gameplay and the dungeoning gameplay pretty much implemented and working, it's really time I start to address game feel to make it more fun to play. So what is game feel? You might have also heard people call it game juice. It's essentially just the small things that give your game a more tactile and satisfying feel when playing through it. It's the impact you feel when you hit an enemy, or the camera shake when you get hit, maybe the ambience of a cave. It's just these small, often unconscious things that enhance a player's immersion. People expect things to act like real life. If an explosion goes off, then they're gonna expect screen shake and an explosion sound. As game developers, our goal is essentially trying to fulfill these real-world expectations to make our game make sense. You can sort of break up game feel into the more system-based definition, which would be kind of how the gameplay makes the situation the player is in feel better, or making input feel better. But I think in this video, I'm specifically more talking about the aesthetic side of things, more the auditory visual feedback of what's happening in game. So there's a bunch of ways to improve upon game feel, starting off with weight. When you drop an object, it's not just gonna slowly float down to the ground. I mean, unless you're on the moon or something. So we need to make this object have more weight. Your friend is going to be easing. You can use easing for all sorts of stuff, and it makes things way more interesting than just moving at a consistent rate. With easing, we can start this object dropping off slow, but have it pick up speed exponentially, and then when it hits the ground, we can even make it bounce a little. You can probably almost feel the difference between these two things. In Starground, I need to add just this. One thing that has always bothered me was that when you attack an enemy, they just sort of stand there. Same thing if you get hit as well. What we need is knockback. If you or an enemy gets hit, that impact should move them. So I added knockback to all attacks, and you can really see the difference. It really makes the attacks feel more real, and it just helps give weapons a little more oomph. And as a side bonus, there's also now a whole new weapon attribute players can experiment with, so bonus points. And with that whole concept of weapon weight too, I kind of disliked how players could just run through a group of enemies and attack while they're doing that. So I made the players stop in place for a moment when they actually swing their weapon. It just makes the swing feel more real, like the weapon you're swinging is heavy and you can't just walk through it like it's nothing. Sounds are also something a lot of new game developers also neglect when it comes to game feel. At a bare minimum, you need to play a sound where someone expects it. If you shoot a gun, people are expecting a gunshot sound. And if you ever fail at fulfilling that expectation, it's going to instantly break a player's immersion. There's a lot of sound effects I need to add to Starground, and I'm kind of starting off with fighting sounds. Some of the things that will really help is a sound when the weapon is swung, a sound when an enemy is hit, and sounds when an enemy attacks or charges an attack. Adding in all of these, it really reinforces what's happening on screen. You don't really pay attention to these sounds, but without them, it feels a little empty. You can listen to the difference between combat before and after. It's definitely a huge improvement. Ambience and background music is also something that really makes the world feel more alive. When you're in a bright grassy field, adding just a little bit of nature ambience makes a big difference. And same with the dungeons, we can have some water dripping, maybe a little bit of tiny reverb on the sound effects. And now it just sounds way more immersive, like you're actually in this environment. These sounds in background music are a lot more important than a lot of people realize. And one last part of game feel that I need to address is the visuals, of course. The way the camera moves, or just the way a weapon looks when you attack. I mean, these are just as important to connect what's happening on screen with what the player is actually doing. So I decided to add a bunch of visual effects for attacking. This includes a weapon trail, enemy particles, flash when a player or enemy is hit. All these really just enhance the look of swinging our weapons, or dealing or taking damage. Moving the camera around in specific ways can also kind of add to this too. For example, when you attack, the camera kind of moves in that direction and also zooms in a little bit when you get hit too. There's just a ton of small little things like that. I mean, I could keep going on about all these little additions forever, but the idea is that all of these effects start to build up and just make the game way more satisfying to play. This has really made a massive impact on combat. Just this extra little bit of juice makes gameplay way more fun to interact with. And I also wanted to address the chat box too. This is always just kind of this annoying obstruction in the way of the player on the bottom left. And of course it's necessary for multiplayer, but a lot of the times it's just in the way of what you want to be seeing. So the solution to this is just fading it out if there haven't been any messages recently. We can just say it stays solid for like 5 seconds, then if no new messages are sent, we can just start to fade it out. It ties back to this concept of maximizing immersion. We don't have chat boxes in our face in real life, right? So we want to minimize these distractions and increase immersion as much as possible. Game feel might not always be the most interesting thing to talk about or add into your game, but definitely don't forget its importance. It can really elevate the feel of your game. You don't have to go all out. Just slowly build it up over time. Start with the bare minimum. Wherever you feel like you have an opportunity to make things better, take advantage of that. If you have any ideas on more ways I could improve the game feel of Starground, maybe just a visual effect, sound, or something like that, please let me know. I read every single comment. Thanks for tuning in for this one. Be sure to check out the Twitch, Discord, and all the other stuff you want in the description. I also want to thank our Ko-fi member, Ben Newman. Really, really appreciate you.